And at that time, they were talking about tearing it down, I believe.
They were. It was. It had plywood on the windows, and had been vacant for many years. And there was a lot of talk about tearing it down. Anyway, my son Patrick and I went over to what was the Montgomery Ward side of it. Now has Wildflower
Right.
Bakery and Doe's Eat House in it, and just helped clean things out. And the biggest occupants then were pigeons from a standpoint.
I did not see it, but that's what.
Yeah, it was.
Of course, I heard.
It wasn't
so
pretty,
forth.
is all I can say.
Yes.
But
Water stained.
it was. The roof was really leaking, and there were just a lot of damages there. But that's when I found that that was something I really wanted to do. So I started going to the Rogers County Historical Society meetings.
Before we move off the hotel, let me ask you one question. At one time, there was a big Will Rogers words sign on the corner. Can you tell us what happened to that sign?
I don't know, but that was a neon sign.
Neon sign, beautiful.
And I'm not sure what happened to that one.
Well, my wife asks me every week, it seems like, find out what happened to that sign. And so far, I have not been able to.
I'm not sure from a standpoint. But anyway, when I went to the Rogers County Historical Society meetings, because the Historical Society had purchased that building before I got involved for $1. Because it basically went to a tax sale. And some of the ladies, and there were ladies back then, got involved and decided they were going to go to the tax sale and just sort of spread the word that anyone wanted to buy this in order to tear it down, they may see some ladies laying down in front of equipment. So the purchasers started going out the door. And so the owner of that time, who was then George Kaiser, he'd purchased the note from the bank because he owned the bank that is now RCB across from the hotel. Finally said, well, why don't we go talk? And you talk to Hoytana Benninger or Peggy Feast, you'll get a bit more of that story. And Wanda Moore, I think, was back at that time also helping out. But they've told me that, the person just said, how much money have you got? And I said, well, we probably got $1. Because there wasn't too much extra money. So they sold it for $1. But the big issue was, what do you do with it?
What do you do with it now?
So the Historical Society at that time just started looking at, well, what are possible uses? Interviewed a lot of people and talked to a lot of people in the community. And then contacted the National Trust for Historic Preservation about who are some companies who renovate and restore these buildings. And we're given the name of a company out of St. Paul, Minnesota called Metro Plains Development, who has renovated a number of old buildings and turned it into senior housing. They use tax credits and loans and grants to be able to do that. And so we contacted them, and they came down, we met at the Belvedere, and they indicated an interest in it if they thought it would work financially.
Right. Now let's point out that, in case anyone does not know, it was a hotel.
It was a hotel.
Had a bath, mineral baths on the top floor.
It did. It was built in 1930 too.
1930s by a Mr. Abraham, I believe.
Louis Abraham.
Louis Abraham.
Yes.
And it had a ballroom and a cafe. Most of the years it was open.
Yes, it did.
And very beautiful lobby, very beautiful staircase. Yeah. Had Claremore's first elevator, if I'm correct.
I know it has an elevator in it.
Well, let me take that back. Mason Hotel. Mason Hotel
had
the first elevator. But it did have elevators. So.
It did.
Okay, please continue.
Yeah. But so anyway, the Historical Society asked me if I'd be willing to head up what they call the Will Rogers Hotel Committee, because each of the hotel projects had a committee or a director in charge of them.
Okay.
And I said I'd be willing to do it. And we had, I was a chair, Barbara Poole was a co-chair, had Elmo Tanner, like I say, Jim Tanner's dad, That committee had Marilyn McLean Goff was on that, and Jane Salee, who was the manager at the Will Rogers Apartments after it was restored for a number of years too.
Okay.
Ms. Standpoint, we're on that. But we were able to talk and come to an agreement on forming a partnership with Metro Plains. And then we later talked to what is now Community Action Resource and Development, whose focus is on helping people in lower incomes. And they agreed to become a partner too, and they ended up putting offices in there in the building after it was restored.
So just on the ground floor, or?
It was on the ground floor and on the third floor is what
On
they
the third
did.
floor also?
The third floor.
Okay.
But what we needed to do as a Historical Society is to raise money, because when we ran the numbers, there was a shortfall and we had to raise $150,000.
How'd you go about doing that?
Well, we basically went around and asked for it, but our biggest success was in giving tours of the hotel. And the paper helped us out a lot. Dave Story wrote editorials. Dorothy Willman wrote a number of articles.
Editor and reporter at the Claremore Progress.
Claremore Progress, yes, they were. And then we gave tours on weekends. And
who would come to the tours? Claremore people?
even people outside, because they'd read it in the paper.
Okay.
And there's a couple weekends we raised over $10,000 in a weekend.
Just on
from
tours.
people from that. Yeah, but just getting the word out. And ultimately, I said, Metro Plains told us we can go ahead and actually restore this. So on December 27th of 1996, which is my wife and my 25th anniversary,
Well,
I was able to announce that the
wow.
hotel been saved.
That was a gift to yourself and your wife and the
Yeah.
community. So thank you.
Anyway, but excuse me. But anyway, in '97 it was restored, and in November of '97 they were able to have a ceremony, and it became senior apartments, 38 senior apartments,
Okay.
and it continues.
30 of them.
38.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it continues to be used. Now you don't have to be a senior to live there.
Right.
But the one thing about the hotel was it was a concrete and steel structure. And that's what saved it, because you were able to restore it. Some of the old buildings, like the Mason Hotel, was a wood structure. It had wood
It
framing.
was falling down.
And it was falling down. And that's why it couldn't be saved.
And it probably would have been quite expensive to tear it down.
It would have been. It would have been, what I understand was over $100,000 to tear down the Will Rogers. And they were talking about some of the other people tearing it down. So anyway, just really pleased we were able to save
Well,
it.
yes.